Have you ever wondered if speaking up at a city council meeting actually makes a difference? Well, in the city of South Fulton, Georgia, a pretty intense debate over gas stations turned into this incredible masterclass in local government, citizen action, and, strategic compromise. So let's get into it and see how residents didn't just stop a law they hated, they completely reshaped it.
Right from the jump, you could just feel the tension. When resident Deanna Resper stood up and said this, she wasn't just, voicing an opinion. Her words were a direct challenge to the city's entire process. It made one thing crystal clear. Residents were ready to fight this thing to the mat.
So, what kicked this whole thing off? Well, it all started with a city law that was already on the books, one that a lot of residents saw as a really critical protection for their community.
This right here was the rule at the heart of everything. Ordinance 2021-033. Think of it like a hard wall, a clear line in the sand. It was designed to stop gas stations from popping up on every single corner in one area. For a lot of people, this 3-mile rule was a vital shield.
And then the city council proposed, not a little tweak, not a revision, but a full repeal. I mean, that one word just sent alarm bells ringing all across the community. That protective wall they were counting on, it was suddenly facing demolition.
And you can bet the residents did not take this quietly. Not at all. They organized, they showed up to public hearings in force, and they made their voices heard so loud and so clear that it changed the entire direction of this debate.
And these concerns were all over the map. This wasn't some simple, not-in-my-backyard thing. People were voicing real fears about public health, about carcinogens like benzene, and they were worried about the environmental impact on homes that rely on well water. A lot of folks also felt like the whole process was this confusing bait and switch.
And all that pushback, it had a direct, measurable impact. Faced with all this well-reasoned and really passionate opposition, the council hit the pause button. They pulled the item from the agenda and actually agreed to do more research. This was a huge, early victory for the residents.
Now, that pause created an opening, an opportunity. The conversation started to shift from just stopping the repeal to, okay, how can we build something better and more thoughtful in its place? Okay, this is the real heart of the compromise, so stick with me. The old rule, that hard wall, was part of the city's zoning code, which is, by design, really hard to change. The new idea moved the rules into the business license code, creating what people started calling guardrails. It's more flexible, sure, but it gives the city this super powerful tool, the ability to revoke a business license if the place becomes a problem. And trust me, that's way faster than a long, drawn-out zoning lawsuit. This quote from a community advocate just sums up the new strategy perfectly. A hard wall was traded for guardrails. It's a really smart compromise. You lose that absolute no-questions-asked blockade, but you gain these more targeted, flexible controls. But here's the catch, right? Those guardrails only work if the community stays engaged and holds the city accountable. So what did this big compromise actually look like in the end? Let's break down the new rules that came out of this whole debate. Okay, remember, this is where it all started. A strict, pretty straightforward 3-mile separation between any two gas stations. And this is the new headline number 1.5 miles. Now, that's a pretty big reduction for sure, but as we're about to see, it's really just one piece of a much larger puzzle. So let's break this down. Yes, the spacing rule was cut in half, but, and this is a big but, look at what was preserved, that critical 1,000-foot buffer from any residential property. And even more importantly, look at what was added. We're talking brand new protections like mandatory environmental reviews and tree buffers. And, like we said, enforcement is now a business license issue, giving the city a much quicker way to step in. So this brings us to maybe the most important takeaway from this entire process. The vote to pass this new ordinance, that wasn't the end. For the residents of South Fulton, it was really just the beginning of a whole new chapter of civic engagement. So, the new law is passed, the fight's over, right? Everyone can go home? Nope. Not even close. The strategy just shifted from opposition to active oversight. You see, this new guardrails framework gives residents specific tools they can use. They can now push for corridor caps, which would basically freeze new gas stations in areas that are already packed. They can demand strict environmental reviews for any project near vulnerable homes. And they can create a community standards checklist to hold any new developer to the highest possible standards. The work just continues. Because what the South Fulton gas station debate really shows us is that when a community is informed, organized, and willing to stay in the game, they can do so much more than just stop a law they don't like. They can actually help write a better one. And in local government, a vote is almost never the end of the story. It's just the beginning of the next one.